Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Stanley Borden. Stanley is from Turkey. He is 7 foot, 241 pounds, and is a former walk-on the Duke men's basketball team. He's also a former starter for the Portuguese under-20s men's national team and now plays for the University of Texas, San Antonio. I read this off your LinkedIn. You walked onto the Duke men's basketball team in September 2021, went to the Final Four in 2022, won the ACC Tournament in 2023, made an Elite Eight appearance in 2024, winning the ACC regular season, tournament championships, and had a Final Four appearance in 2025, which I think is awesome. And you also have a bachelor degree from Duke in computer science and a minors in computational biology and English. Crazy resume, by the way. But I wanted to get started by asking you, Stanley, how did you originally get into basketball and what was it like growing up in Turkey?
Sure. So the from Turkey part is where it gets complicated from the get-go. I rehearsed a line I tell people at Duke because it's not as simple as, oh, hey, I'm from this city and whatever. I was born in New York. I grew up in Turkey. My father's side is American. My mother's side is Turkish-Portuguese. So I'd spend the summers in New York kind of mostly visiting my grandmother as well as doing summer camps and things of that sort. That ties into the basketball question and how I got into it. I started off playing tennis as a child. That's where a lot of my coordination and my footwork comes from. When I hit 6'9", when I was 15 years old, that's when I decided, yeah, exactly. It makes you think, well, you must have been like 6'7" in eighth grade and 6'4" in seventh grade, so you should have started earlier. And I did. I was doing weekend basketball at 10, 11 years old, but it wasn't that serious. And then when I hit ninth grade, I realized, both for the sake of admissions and scholarships and things of that sort, that basketball would be the way to go. And so at 15, I was playing for a team called Teşvikiye, which is a smaller club in Turkey. We played a friendly match against Beşiktaş, which you're probably familiar for the soccer aspect, right? Black and white team.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I said I want to go there. And so we talked to the coaches. I started playing for the Beşiktaş U16 team called the Yıldız Takım, the star team in Turkish. After that, I then just got really, really involved into basketball. I mean, the Turkish club system, much like most European club systems or soccer/football academy systems, are very involved. A lot of the time, the kids will either participate in part-time school or online school or something a little bit less serious than a regular school. I was not doing that. I was very invested in my studies, so I'd spend an hour and a half commuting to school, an hour and a half commuting back, and then any time between 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. our practices would start, and that would be about for 6, 7 days a week. Maybe we'd have an off day on Sunday, probably not. And that's how it started. I can keep going if you'd like, but that's how it started to get serious for me with basketball.
I think one of the first questions I probably asked you, and when I introduced my younger brother to you, it was the same question he asked, which I'm sure you probably get every single day, is if you get asked, do you play basketball because you're so tall? Does that annoy you at all for people to automatically associate your height with playing basketball? Like, how does that make you feel? Because, I'm not a 7 foot person, but maybe getting a question once would be nice, but getting it on an almost daily basis could get kind of annoying.
It's a good question. I think it depends on my mood, to be frank, but it's understandable. I think obviously I'm a person and I'm multifaceted, as you described with the resume, and I have a lot of different interests. But if I was someone who wasn't 7 feet tall, if I was sub 6'5", and I saw someone who was over 6'5", I would probably also ask if they were a basketball player. So you just have to have some kind of empathy in that situation and have some kindness and patience from there. But it's not ever really annoying. It can be tiring if it's like the 10th time in one day, but it's not annoying.
But how does that, just going slightly deeper on that question, like how does associating with the rest of society really function? Because you're quite literally heads above everyone else. You'd walk through a cloud, you're going to be the first one that anyone notices. Even me talking to you, like you're literally a head above me. So how do you associate with other people whilst being so much taller than everyone else?
It's a good question, and I can answer it in a couple of ways. I'll give you an example from high school, which I think it explains a lot of how I try to view it. you have to understand, regardless of what your background is, how that background or your physical features might imprint onto someone else. Uh, when I was in high school, I want to say I was in 10th or 11th grade. I was in some kind of academic intellectual argument with a girl in English class, and it got very heated. She stood up, threw her hands on the table, started shouting, and I was about to do the same. And before I did, my English teacher, Mr. Maldonado was his name, wonderful guy from New York, from the Bronx. He pulled me outside. He himself was 6'4", big beard, really smart guy. And he pulled me outside, and he's like, "I know how you were about to react, but you can't do that." And I asked, "Why can't I do that? If anything, it's just reciprocal." And it's like, no, because at the time I was like 6'10" or 6'11", and everything that comes with that. The way that you were perceived is going to be fundamentally different. And my father taught me a lot of lessons, being in kindergarten or primary school, because he himself was a larger guy as well, 6'6", and from New York, so big personality. But it's one of those things that you have to be cognizant of when speaking to people, right? Having a certain amount of humility, having a certain amount of docility, not to be overly aggressive, as the height may already have inherently a kind of aggressiveness to it. So it's just something that you have to be considerate of. And while you try not to change your personality based off of it, depending on the situation, you know how to manage your reactions and your personality and aggression and things of that sort.
I don't want to spend the whole podcast on your height, but there is one last question that I wanted to ask. And that is more on your perception of the world and like social anxiety. Because I feel like for most people, that's something they deal with, on an almost daily basis, particularly in this digital and social media age, is how to relate with other people. Then you go online and everyone's a millionaire and everyone's got a job at a top firm and, everyone is really fit and seemingly doing well. So when they go outside, we have these own internal thoughts of how we perceive ourselves to be. But let's say you became really famous or you're a top athlete, as you were at Duke, as we'll get onto later on. But even just having that in-belt, being taller than everyone else, how do things like social anxiety and your perception of the world, how has that impacted, how you view the world, how you view society, how you view social anxiety and things like that?
That's a very good question again, and I'll explain. I'll give you an answer with an anecdote. I won't say I had very bad social anxiety, but I went to a very small high school, international school in Istanbul, Turkey. Each class was about 50 kids, so 50 kids per grade. And I want to say the summer of 10th grade, I realized that I wanted to branch out. I wanted to meet more people. I wanted to be able to, whether it be on the subway or in the street or at a restaurant or wherever it might be, speak to anyone and everyone and build a friendship or at least build some kind of rapport. I remember the first or second time I was doing this, I was going to and from a part of Istanbul and where I lived on the subway. And I was stuttering. I was unable to explain myself. I was doing this between Turkish and English, depending on who I was speaking to, if they were a tourist or a local. And I remember thinking, well, I still want to keep developing this. There's a point to this, I promise. And it relates to my time at Duke especially, and then having 2 years of COVID from junior, senior year of high school, and then getting to Duke. I realized that social anxiety is normal, but if you want to think of it kind of like I don't know how much you've studied biology, but if you're thinking of a reaction happening in a cell, you have a certain amount of activation energy you need for that, and enzymes can lower the activation energy you need to do that, right? So I thought that every time I was talking to people, getting to know new people, being friendly, that I'm strengthening that enzyme. I'm decreasing my amount of social anxiety that I need to get over in order to be able to talk to someone new. And I knew, especially from my time at Duke, that I wanted to be able to, height or no height, whatever it might be, meet as many people and find the friends that I really wanted to be around. I think a lot of people in those environments can find themselves with friends of convenience or locked into their circles via sports or academics with their classes or clubs. And I very much wanted to find my people regardless of my convenient circumstances. So when it comes to your point about height and how it may be to relate to other people and how it is, I think most of my friends, especially after being with them for a certain amount of time, they don't really think about it anymore. I like meeting people sitting down. That's usually my favorite way because then either basketball doesn't come up or the height doesn't come up. But there have been a number of times, I mean, friends I've had for years, be it in college or otherwise, I see them after a long period of time. They're like, I forgot how tall you were, right? It's like I have to raise my neck to look up at you. And I think that's just a testament to the personality being more important than the actual physical appearance.
The point you made about social anxiety was a sort of necessary question for me to ask because it's something that I've sort of dealt with my own internally over time, and I've definitely got better at, whether that's going up to girls, meeting my girlfriend, or in a more formal work environment. It's something that I've started to overcome and got a lot better at. And I would definitely agree with you, the idea of just doing it consistently. And as you put it in a biological example with the enzymes, it becomes easier as you do it. But what I think is awesome is how you've taken something which was sort of inbuilt in that you are just, in reality, much taller than everyone else. And instead of hiding away from that and, framing away from who you truly are, it's allowed you to become more of yourself, and you've sort of taken it on the chin, and you have these sort of forced interactions because everyone sort of sees you, to be able to become more confident, to be better at meeting people, to show people who you are for who you are and not because of what you look like. And I think that's very admirable.
Harvey, if I may say, the irony of college these days, especially with social media, is a lot of people, I won't say the word cower, but they'll just spend their times in their rooms on social media, not really wanting to interact with people and undergoing some kind of loneliness when you are literally on a campus of over 6,000 people, capable of meeting any of them by just going up and introducing yourself. It's one of those things where it's difficult, don't get me wrong, and there is always some level of anxiety when doing it, but there is no better time, especially between 18 to 22, to do that, I think.
Well, I actually wanted to go deeper into your basketball, but you've kind of given me a natural segue to something else I wanted to talk about. And that was sort of, so we'll go back to the basketball point. But something I've sort of noticed being on a campus like Duke, and similarly to you, we had this app Fizz, which, allowed people to post anonymously. And I actually interviewed the founder of Fizz on my podcast and think the app's great and everything. But I was, similarly to you, I was definitely the forefront of both a lot of like nice comments on Fizz, but also anonymous hate and posting. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to have fame within a campus environment. AKA, everyone knows you're on the basketball team. Everyone knows who you are. And as a reflection of that, people can't understand who you are. You have a parasocial relationship with them in which they know everything about you, but you know nothing about them. And sort of how that's affected your mental health, your physical health, and how you interact with people, particularly on a campus environment like Duke. Like, we focus on the positives, but I'd also love if you could share the negatives of things that people wouldn't think about unless they had, you know, a campus celebrity status or being an athlete like yourself.
Sure, sure, sure. Well, I'll answer in multiple parts. And you're right. It is often that, especially in these media environments, we focus more on the positive than the negative. So I appreciate you giving me the platform to talk about it. Parasocial is the right word to use. I think in general, regardless of what level of fame, once you cease being a person to most people and you become an idea, the capacity for people to say good things about you is also there. But especially when it comes to hatred and a lack of empathy, that is definitely more par for the course. It's easier to empathize with a person than an idea, but once someone becomes an idea, then any level of vitriol or cruelty is okay. At least that's how most people think. It doesn't mean that it is. I think Duke and all elite schools suffer, to some degree, the students, from this idea that everyone works so hard to get there, and everyone believes to some extent that in getting there that it will make them feel better about themselves, like I've made it. And the problem is it's really just one treadmill ending, and then a lot of people hop on another treadmill. Duke is very pre-professional, be it when it comes to finance or pre-med or pre-law. And a lot of insecurity within people can come out in the worst ways, especially when you have such apps like the one that you just described. So it's difficult. I think the key to it for me was to not stop being myself. I'm friendly, I'm gregarious, I like meeting people. That's, I didn't want to let people's hatred or unsolicited photography or harassment. I mean, I can name a number of examples that were pretty bad, of things that happened. Were just people that didn't really know me, who think that they know you, but they've never actually met you, saying or doing things that are bad, that are mean, that are disheartening, and makes you question yourself, makes you question why things are happening. But for me, I was able to have a strong support system, of my family, my friends, of professors that became mentors, my coaches, my teammates. And I think in general, it makes you question if people want to believe or say or do things based off of hearsay. It does say more about them than it does about you. The logical argument that the burden of proof is on yourself to disprove things rather than on others is really intellectually lazy. And I think when it comes to anonymous apps or anything online, those are breeding grounds for echo chambers. And the lack of critical thinking, I think, is telling for a lot of people. And it surprises me that people of such intellectual clarity can have such low moral clarity when it comes to aspects such as that. I mean, people talk about IQ versus EQ. In general, I think the values and traits that I look for in friends and partners and whoever it might be, it's intelligence on all of those things, but also introspectiveness, self-awareness, ability to be self-critical. And you find that with more intelligent people, while that should actually be equivalent, it is more so the case that it makes it easier to create false justifications for poor behavior. So I could talk more about that, but that's a bit of my 2 cents.
Yeah, and not to just pick on Fizz because I actually quite like the app and but segueing away from that because the Fizz was more of a symptom than the root cause, and the root cause is that through anonymity, people feel a separation from reality, which creates alienation away from the people themselves and more towards the ideas of hate and hopping on that train just because or because everyone else has this idea of who they are versus who they actually are, and this can be taken across an array of different people, an array of different cases, which is purely based on hearsay and not on the actual reality of getting to know a person. And it's definitely like a huge problem. But on that point of you having that sort of clout on campus of being a student athlete, many athletes, whether even prior to NIL, were sort of separated from the rest of the student body in the way that like I'm a recruited athlete, I might go to the NFL or the NBA, so why would I relate to anyone else? But I've always noticed that you, aside from many other people, have kind of been an example of sort of trying to immerse yourself into student life, no matter how much clout, success, or anything you've had. Why do you think you felt so strongly that you wanted to relate to everyone else, even while you have all these echo chambers of alienation going on around you? What do you think was the cause to want to be like and hang out with everyone else, even with everything else going on?
Very simply, be it because of COVID or just the people I was around in high school, I wanted to find and be around the right people. Regardless of emotional or wisdom or any kind of clarity in that sense, Duke does have, as do schools in its similar caliber, people of immense intellectual capacity. And that should come with the ability to think critically and have empathy and whatever. Sometimes it doesn't. But I wanted to find my people, and I eventually did, and I found new people every year. And that was an interesting phenomenon because I think for most at such places, you kind of have your group that you go through all 4 years with. I mean, we can talk about the turnover in basketball as well and how
Yeah.
changing teammates every year also leads to that. But look, I care very deeply for my teammates. I think that they were fantastic for my 4 years that I was there. And I understand why, for a lot of them, they don't want to go to woo at different times. They don't want people to take. You feel like you're in a zoo sometimes if people are just taking photos of you. Taking photos with you is one thing, but of you is another thing. And regardless of who you are, and we don't, it could be names, it could be no names, but it's alienating to do that. And I think for me, I didn't want to allow that alienation to make me stop doing the good parts of it. Regardless of people being mean or rude or being too fanatic at times and making you feel like an animal in a zoo. I think that the beauty of a college campus and the beauty of being in college is that you want to meet people, you want to talk to people, you want to share perspectives, you want to be challenged. And I think that can come in the classroom, that can come in clubs, but that should come just as a matter of being in the same place for such an extended period of time. So I did not want to allow the negatives to take over the positives. Call me stubborn for that. But as a result of that, and I can say this very confidently, all of my close friendships, close professional relationships, close everything have come to some extent from me taking initiative. So it's paid off. You just have to be tough enough and have a support system that you're consistently building all the time to do that.
I appreciate your openness to talk about all these topics because I know they're not easy to talk about in general, let alone on an online platform. But I'm sure that many people will be able to take away a lot from everything you've talked about there. But moving on more to the focal point of basketball itself, I think it's one thing to play a sport in high school and to use that to get into a place like Duke. But I didn't really know this before I went to Duke, coming from the UK. But Duke quite literally is one of the most successful college basketball franchises of all time. And so whether you're Cooper Flagg or on the bench or in the squad at all, it's still a tremendous feat whatsoever. I was wondering if you could take me a little bit. I mean, you mentioned it briefly before, but what it was like when you realized you were incredible at basketball. What motivated you to walk onto a team like Duke, and just sort of what that perspective was like from a top-down level?
Um, well, I'll give you I'll give you how it happened. I mean, the goal in high school was to either earn a scholarship or have basketball in some way help me get into a good school. I was my high school's valedictorian, highest GPA. I had a I had
Wow.
a great SAT score. I had all of the prerequisites, but I think everyone knows that that's just the foot in the door. You need something else to get you actually in, right? Um, so unfortunately, because of injury and COVID, that didn't end up working out in the way I wanted it to. I had offers from a number of Division One institutions. I had offers from D3 schools as well, Ivy League, other high academic. Those existed, but they either required me taking an extra year because of COVID, leading to everyone having an extra year in terms of eligibility, or elsewhere, or otherwise rather. So I decided that I just wanted to go straight through. I applied regular decision, didn't really have basketball touching any part of my application process, and I got into a number of very good schools. Duke ended up being the place that I chose for a number of reasons, but most of it was just fit. I spoke to alumni, I spoke to some students that were there, uh, sent some emails to different people. It ended up being the right fit when I was making my decision. So chose to do that, and then the walk-on process is something which is kind of crazy in the way it happened. Duke does not typically do tryouts. I think that they've done tryouts in the late 2000s, early 2010s when people were injured and they needed practice bodies. But between graduating from high school and enrolling in my first year at Duke, I played for the Portuguese U20 national team, something that you mentioned at first. And that was a great experience. We played in Brno, Czechia. COVID made it really weird, but it was very good for me. And then the day before move-in day, note, I don't know if you had ever visited the campus before going to Duke. I had not. I had not. I'd read great things about the school. I'd seen the photos, but the day before move-in day, and I'd been in sporadic contact with one of the coaches on staff, but like iPhone messages with typos. I mean, nothing really that serious. And my dad convinced me the day before move-in day to message again, and this time saying, "Hey, like I'm here, I'm going to school here, like this is everything in terms of a basketball resume." And we sent that to Coach Shire, just literally by email, and within an hour, he called back, and the conversation basically went, it's very rare that we get a 7 foot tall regular student with basketball playing experience, right? Where basketball played no role in the admissions, like we only kind of sort of knew about him. Would you be willing to meet with our coaching staff at 5 p.m. the next day, which was move-in day, right? A day that everyone remembers as if you went to Duke. People pop that trunk, you open everything.
Yeah.
It's a memorable time. So
Is this
uh,
not Coach K?
this was Coach Shire, but the meeting
Oh,
was
okay.
with two of the assistant coaches. So,
Right, okay.
but it was Coach K's last year that I walked on. So, moving day happens. My mom basically tells me to leave the room. She's going to organize everything. She wanted me to go make friends and meet people. And I come back around 4 p.m. ish. And if you remember, the cars are parked on West Campus, and obviously everyone's on
Yeah.
East. And my dad and I go to the meeting, and we walk towards the building that we think it is. It's supposed to be in front of Cameron. And um, we asked the security lady outside, "Hey, is this Cameron Indoor Stadium?" She's like, "No, honey, this is Brody Recreation Center. Cameron's on West Campus. You're on East Campus." So at that point, it was like 4:30, 4:35. We're freaking out. There's no way for us to get there in time. And so this comes with a social anxiety question. I consider myself someone who takes initiative. I knocked on, this is the circle right near where Randolph is. I knock on some random guy's window. He rolls down the window. I'm like, hey, this is going to sound crazy. We have a meeting with the Duke basketball staff at 5 p.m. We messed up on the location and the time. Can you please take us there? And he's like, get in the effing car. Uh, we get in the
That's awesome.
car. He talks about how, oh, he's from New Jersey. He was dropping his younger brother off for his freshman year. He actually went to Duke a couple years back. He drops us off just in the nick of time. We make it there. End up having the meeting. My first time walking around West Campus, the Gothic architecture. It's beautiful. We exchange contact information again. They're like, okay, cool. Come back next week. We're going to text you with a time, and you're going to play with our guys. So a week goes by. I promise the story will end soon. I know that we.
I'm enjoying the story. It doesn't need to end.
Okay. So we. So I get their contact information. Have a great orientation week. Have a great first week of classes. All of my classes are at 1:45 and 3:30 p.m. Practices are in the afternoon. That's not going to work. I show up to my first tryout, my first practice, wearing white and green Adidas Dame 4s. Duke is a blue and white Nike Royal Blue School. I'm wearing like a black Walmart stretchy athletic shirt. I mean, the whole thing that you could imagine. And I play. I mean, that year it was Paolo Banchero, Mark Williams, Wendell Moore, Trevor Keels, those guys, AJ Griffin. I mean, that was Coach K's final team. That was my first year. I play well. I then play 2-on-2 against the other walk-ons. They invite me back again the next day. After that second day, Nolan Smith, who's now the head coach at Tennessee State, sits me down on the scorer's table in Cameron, right where the student section is across from. He daps me up and he's like, congrats, you're walking on to the Duke basketball team. I can't
Wow.
believe it. There's like a trial period of like a month and a half. We're doing medical tests. I have to be NCAA cleared, all of the things that are there. But the craziest part of this story is I want to say in October of that year, maybe mid-September, I'm at a party. Then this guy comes over. He asks me for a photograph. And my whole life, people have asked for photographs because of the height, because of the basketball, because of whatever. And so we take the photo, and he's like, hey, my name is this. And I actually think that you know my brother. He's the one that dropped you off at Cameron on moving day.
Wow.
And I told him, I'm like, dude, you want a photo? I'll give you tickets the rest of your life. Are you kidding me? This is only because your brother was kind enough to give us a ride. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all tied together, but this kind of being able to overcome your social anxiety, take initiative, kind of do the things that you want to do to get things done. It's weird how both of those aspects of basketball and that part of my personality kind of culminated, even with the start of the journey at Duke. So.
I think that's an absolutely incredible story, and I'm definitely going to ask you some more questions focused on that. You're a very good storyteller, and don't for one bit feel like you need to rush through it because I'm sure everyone listening as well is just as tied to the screen.
I'll try my best.
Could you talk a little bit about so you joined the Duke basketball team, right? This is some life-changing stuff, incredibly exciting. Could you talk a little bit about what that first year was like? What it was like playing on the Duke basketball team. You've even had times when you've gone on the court and played in some key games. What was that overall experience like as a member of the Duke men's basketball team?
Um, Again, a lot of different ways to attack the question, but what I'll say is you learn how things work at the highest level of sport, which I think is a given. But that year with Coach K and then the 3 years with Coach Dyer afterwards, we run a very tight ship.
Yeah.
From operational stuff to in game to just to our managers who do a fantastic job, how practices are run. I mean, everything is boom, 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 boom. And while I won't say Turkey is more lackadaisical, Turkey has the kind of culture where traffic exists, and while you shouldn't show up late, if you only show up 5 minutes before, it's not necessarily frowned upon. And if you don't show up 20 minutes early, at least it's like, dude, what are you doing, right? At Duke,
Yeah.
at least. So for me, there was an adjustment period of figuring out the culture, the norms. I'd only ever played basketball in Turkish and Portuguese. It's one of those things where it's an international game, but just a different level when you get to college. And so I think first and foremost was understanding how a program like that is run. Secondly, to even be able to contribute to a team at that caliber, just the individual work I had to put in. While it's not necessarily reflected with court time when I was a Duke, I would lift extra, I would run extra, I would stretch extra, I would do agility training on the ladder, I would get extra shots up. I mean, that first year involved a lot of personal sacrifice time wise in order to get to a level where I could really compete with those guys who, again, 5 NBA draft picks by the end of that year. Which that isn't to say that I wasn't good coming in, but everyone else gets the summer. All freshmen, everybody comes back for the summer from about late June to early August. And while I was at the Portuguese national team, that's a time to build your strength. That's the time to get in the weight room. That's the time to figure out how the offense and the defense and the spacing and everything else in college works, at least at the start of it. And obviously a time to bond with teammates and meet people and understand those dynamics and build chemistry. So I started a bit late, just by virtue of circumstance, and that made the first year difficult because it felt like a constant game of catch up. I'm not sure exactly what your secondary education was like, but I was in the IB diploma program. For that, I had pretty, I won't say 1-to-1 by any means, but pretty, trying to find the right word. I had a good connection with my teachers, and I'd be able to ask questions and get on the whiteboard and do things of that sort. And your first year, even into your second year, it's 300-person classes, 400-person classes, especially for the big Duke majors like computer science and economics and things of that sort. So it was a big adjustment, and it was kind of one of those figure it out as you go. Cross that bridge when you get to it, and every single day was a new bridge.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting time. I mean, I had the time of my life. It was just wonderful. I met so many new people, and obviously basketball opened up a lot of opportunities by traveling to all these places and becoming so close with my teammates. But yeah, it was very difficult. It was definitely one of those. Yeah, I'm running on 4 hours of sleep. I mean, I not to make it a pity party, but my uncle died in the fall, surprise heart attack, and this is my first time being away from home at such distance with such tragedy occurring. Uh, and it's not, I'm not smiling because of that, because that was
No,
happy,
yeah.
but just because you think about it, and it's crazy how it was just being hit from every single angle and managing to still stay up straight. So that first year was definitely an adjustment for sure.
Was there ever a goal or a thought in your mind that you wanted to become a starter for the team or perhaps make it to the NBA?
Well, we're going to see how the professional slash collegiate basketball journey continues this year. But when it comes to that, I think initially the goal was let me try to earn a role on this team and a role on the playing roster and the rotation, and just without without the kind of, I should say, blaming anyone. Duke is the kind of environment where we're, especially at my position, 4-5. We're picking the cream of the crop from high school to the transfer portal every single year. In my 4 years at Duke, the guys who I trained with most exclusively, either in the mornings when we're not practicing or even in practice, is Paolo Banchero, Mark Williams, Derek Lively, Kyle Filipowski, Kaman Malawash, Cooper Flagg. I mean, I could keep going. These are guys who I think all that I've named were first round draft picks, with the exception of Kyle, which we're going to see this season exactly how and why he was left to the second round, because I don't think that should have been the case. I think in general, when you're playing against such talent, you have to learn how to control what you can control. And in my case, that was, I'm going to contribute to the team as much as I can. I'm going to give it my all in practice every day. I'm going to try to make everyone around me better. And I'll be honest, by osmosis, I got a lot better myself. They always say that if you are the biggest fish in the pond, you need to find a new pond. And I was never really the biggest fish in the pond, but I think I grew in size as a result of being a part of Duke basketball for 4 years.
Was there never a part of you that said, after 2 or 3 years, I want to transfer during my undergrad to another school to try and get more D1 playing minutes? Or was it, get the degree from Duke and then do that secondary?
Um, I think, well, I'll say this. I think just circumstantially, when it came to my values and my family's values, education is number one. And so I don't think, given the fact that the portal is very non-guaranteed, I mean, I'll be frank, I had 25, 30 schools reach out to me from where I was seriously considering. There were more outside of that seriously considering range, but that were Division 1 from low major to high major, from low academic to high academic. And again, second, third year, if I chose to enter the portal, I don't know how many of my credits would have transferred over. I don't know if I would have to
Yeah.
retake classes. I don't know what all of that was going to look like. And for me, it was a good situation. It was a good enough situation at Duke where I thought, let me get this degree and then afterwards see what I can get in
Yeah,
terms
you
of
still got a
basketball.
Duke degree, right? You
No,
still got a Duke
get the
degree.
Duke degree, and obviously I would have wanted to play more. Obviously I would have wanted that opportunity. I would be lying if I said I didn't, but I understand what the circumstances were, and it is what it is, and I'm grateful nonetheless of having that opportunity and for having the privilege, frankly, of being around such success and being able to contribute to that success for 4 years.
Two people, and we spoke about this earlier in the podcast, the focus on the idea of someone versus the person themselves. Could you talk to me a little bit about what it was like to play with both Cooper Flagg and Jared McCain? Cooper Flagg being obviously the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, and Jared McCain also being a lottery pick, but has got a huge following on social media. Could you talk a little about what it was like playing with those people, their character as people, and yeah, what makes them actually people instead of just the idea of them?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's obvious what their talent level is and how good they are and what their work ethics are. I don't think I need to speak to that. All of those are at a very high level, and everyone in the NBA seems to think the same as well, hence why they have the contracts that they do, and where they were drafted. They're all good guys. I think Duke in general just picks very good guys. I mean, obviously, very high level basketball talent, but if we're just talking about keeping each other accountable and having good personalities, I mean, whether it's a testament to being from good family backgrounds or other people who've been around them, I don't know. But being in a locker room every day with each of those guys for a year respectively, incredibly kind, incredibly competitive, incredibly funny a lot of the time, more so than you'd think. And it's one of those parts of the unfortunate part about college sports is that people are 18 to 22. There needs to be some level of leniency given for that, and also some level of human understanding. And be it because of the media, be it because of social media, be it because of stardom, that usually is not the case, and it's unfortunate. And I think more so than anything else, while basketball is a huge part of each of these guys' lives, it's what they've dedicated large amounts of their lives to. And this applies to Cooper, Jared, and everyone else who's done extremely well in the sport. They're people. They're college students. They at the times were 18 to 22, are now 18 to 24 if you want to include grad students. And that means that they act as college students do. They're experimenting with things. They're going to woo. They're walking around on campus. They're going to class. I mean, they're doing all of those things while also being high level, very famous, having a lot of clout, as you said earlier, people. I think it's unfortunate when the idea aspect overwhelms the person aspect, because I'll say this from my personal experience, and I'm sure that they've experienced it as well. Obviously at very different levels, but when you meet someone and you talk to someone, you're hoping to have a person-to-person conversation. And if the fandom or the fanaticism or whatever else overwhelms that, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
What advice, if you could deliver one message to the media, other students, other fans about how to engage with the person and not the idea of who someone is, what would you tell them and how people can be better moving forward?
I mean, you're telling me to address a lot of the heart of how the media industry is run and or human insecurity, so it's difficult.
Questions I ask, man.
No, no, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's good. I see why you get good guests. Look, I think when it comes to the media side, I don't think you can stop that. I think that that's just kind of what it's built around. The hype, hype is probably the best word to use around, especially Duke basketball stars or Duke athletes. It is what it is. It overall, I mean, it generates money for the school, generates money for the athlete. Hopefully now with NIL, And it's a positive in that respect. But it can be dehumanizing as well. When we're talking about college students to student athletes or college students to other college students, I mean, you can put the water in front of the horse, but you can't lead it to the water. I use a lot of expressions. I use a lot of
Yeah.
analogies because I think that it's what they do best. I've been in a number of discussions or arguments or confrontations with people, and you can't make someone come to the table in good faith if they aren't already willing to do so themselves. And at that point, I think you have to cut your losses and choose your battles wisely. So be genuine, be kind, ask intelligent questions. Just many people, it is about, oh, I want to go and know this person or see this person or talk to this person for some ulterior motive. That's just the reality. And I don't think you can extinguish that if you have the ulterior motive. You have to find it. It's a question of how do you make someone a kinder, nicer, better person.
Yeah. No,
And, and
yeah,
that's not something that you can necessarily solve externally. So it's a difficult one to answer. I think that I think those people exist. I'm very thankful that I one that I met them, and two that I had the initiative to meet them and not let negativity affect me in that way. But it requires a certain kind of person to not want to hole up in your dorm room watching Netflix and just waste away going to class, eating, and doing that, and to actually maximize the college experience.
yeah, I definitely think there's two sides to it. One being when you're speaking to someone that wants to spread hate, sees the idea of you. I've never actually heard that before, so I appreciate you saying that. Sees the idea of you and not the person that you are. Arguing with them is not really going to do any good. The thing that I've told myself about how to better impact media, because obviously the media wants to drive clicks, so we'll have more extreme stories, which will create fake media, which creates these false self-prophesizing narratives around people. I've learned that the way to try and fix those issues is less about speaking to people on an individual level, except with open debate, but more so that when you get to points of influence and that when you get your own platform, it's about educating the people around you to say, these are people too. You're allowed to have your own opinion. You're allowed to have free speech. But it's about saying that you can say this horrible thing about someone, but to recognize that they are a person too. They're not invincible. They are only 18 years old and they're trying to be human just like me and you, as well as being this amazing figure that they are. That's at least the story that I've told myself.
I think it's a good story. I think for me, there was a bit of a dissonance. I mean, and this is just the case. You think, oh, if someone's so smart, then how can they think this way, right? The way I break down people typically, if they're doing something in some way malevolent, is they're either a bad person, which is very rare. I don't think many people are fundamentally bad. They're a not very intelligent person, in which case they're too ignorant to see what they're doing as being in bad faith. And the third is that, and I think this applies to a lot of people in these high pressure environments, which required a lot of sacrifice to get to, there is something blocking the moral clarity, and that's insecurity. That's something going on in their own lives. That's pain. That's difficulty. And I think the best, if you're someone who's suffering from that kind of malignance, as I have dealt with in college, as I'm sure others have dealt with as well, it having that kind of empathy, almost that kind of forgiving nature, pity, if you want to call it that, which I think it was for me at a time, of like, this person's dealing with their own thing. They're just projecting that because at this moment they're too weak to deal with it themselves. It helps deal with a lot of disbelief, and that I think was very helpful for me.
You mentioned the idea of doing basketball as a career. There's obviously NIL, name, image, and likeness, in which basketball players can now profit off of making money from their name, image, and likeness. It's in the name. That's something I've definitely touched upon in quite a few of my prior podcasts. Could you talk to me a little bit about how basketball as a career has evolved in your mind with the likes of NIL? You've obviously moved to the University of Texas, San Antonio, and sort of like, you can now make money in college. Could you just kind of give me your perspective as someone sort of in the world of NIL, how that's impacted you, how that's impacted the relationship with your teammates, the people around you, and sort of the idea that you can make money now instead of the NBA being the only route?
Yeah, I think it's a big reason why you see a lot of college basketball stars who've done very well in college stay in college and not try their luck on the professional route. Sometimes their university's brand, by virtue of just the amount of fans they have, the number of alumni they have, and the people who want to build relationships and partnerships. It could be car dealerships. It could be canes. It could be anything. I mean, it could literally be any store, any merchandising product you can think of. It just becomes more profitable for them to stay. That's why you see fourth, fifth, sixth year players at times, especially post COVID, where a lot of guys got a year back. How it changes the dynamics. I have a football example. I had a football player once tell me that rather than being a scholarship player and walk on now, or like rotation player than scholarship player and walk on, now you have scholarship and NIL, scholarship, and then walk on afterwards. So things have changed significantly. And it only makes sense. I mean, if a team is willing to, and yes, it's supposed to be name, image, and likeness, but especially with the NCAA settlement, teams are now able to pay players directly without other kinds of subterranean means in the shadows. Even though it's now technically legal, it's a mess. But it means you're paying for what you want, and so if you think that a guy is going to bring a certain value to your team on the court, you're going to be willing to pay him more. It makes if I want I'm trying to give an example in another field, but the guys I want working more for me, be it on the trading floor or somewhere else, I'm going to pay more, right? And it's very similar when it comes to basketball. So it's changed the dynamic. I think sports has moved towards professionalism, college sports at least, more than they were previously. It's a question of how that's going to affect college legacies and branding and fans, and whether you're going to have the same kind of credence from fans towards their college brands in terms of, are you following this school because you're following a player through their 4-year journey, or are you following them because of the clothing that they wear, because of the colors, because of the logo? That's the question, and it's time will tell how that will actually formulate. For me personally, with basketball as a career, I think for a matter of circumstances, be it with COVID, with high school and being in Turkey and recruiting being difficult as a result of that, and then obviously at Duke as a walk-on for 4 years, there is an itch that I have, which is I don't think I've actually been able to, not out of not wanting to or not having the ability to, not having the desire to, but I have not had the ability to see this thing through. To really, really have the opportunity in playing basketball and to get better as a player and to be able to contribute to a team, not just in the background and making others better and preparing us for games, but actually playing. So the choice in this year, and I had choices to to go to very good schools and not necessarily have a playing role, and I had those options to go into the actual working field and have a proper career in the working world, but I think I would be remiss at the age of 40 or 45 if I didn't actually give playing basketball a real shot. So part of the rationale between going to UTSA and choosing between the schools that I chose in the transfer portal was to have that opportunity and to give it my all and to give it 100%. And another analogy, another reference for you, the man in the arena speech, Teddy Roosevelt. And I use this, I applied this to a lot of my decisions in university. I applied this to my academic career. I applied this to basketball. It's not the spectator. It's not the one who says things about the person. It's not one who just cries and shouts. It's the people actually in the arena. And whether they win or lose, at least they know the taste of defeat rather than the bitterness of indifference. I'm totally butchering the quote. But the point of it is, I want to give it my all, especially for this year and hopefully into the future. And when it's run its course, it will have run its course, but I won't be in any way regretful as a result of that.
Sometimes I like to, with my own personal goals, I like to look forward at that point in time, whether that be an internship, an exam, a job, a fitness challenge, a rugby game, whatever it is. And I think back to that time and I tell myself, okay, what if I lost? What if I lost? What if I didn't get that internship? What if I didn't get that job? What if I didn't win that rugby match? What would have been the point of difference in my life that would have led me to that moment? Was it that I didn't train hard enough for the gym? That I didn't practice my pass? I didn't run hard enough? Did I not do enough networking calls? Did I not spend enough time learning the news and learning all the financials? Did I not spend enough time studying for the exam, pay attention in class, or do the hard things? If I was to ask you that same question in a year's time or 2 or 3 years' time, what that point of difference was, if basketball didn't go your way and you weren't able to make it a career, what do you think you could do now moving forward to get closer to that goal of playing basketball professionally? What do you think that point of difference will be?
Frankly, at this point, I think skill wise, while there's obviously always things to work on, if you're asking literally in terms of actual tangible parts
Yeah.
of my game,
Yeah.
it is just giving it my all in practice here at UTSA and doing what I can. The role is very different, and it's getting acclimated to that role and having the patience for changing from 4 years of a kind of role at Duke to a new one here at UTSA. It's having that leniency with myself, and it's also making sure I'm in great shape, getting on the bike, putting in an extra 10, 20 minutes on the bike or on the treadmill or in the pool or something like that. Especially as a big man, right? As a center, as a power forward center in basketball, you're doing a lot of the dirty work. You're playing really hard, and you're playing really hard whenever you're on the floor. So it's really important to make sure that you're physically in shape when it comes to your conditioning, and also that you're strong. So that's getting in the weight room. That's a lot of what this summer was about when I got to San Antonio. It's making sure to maintain and or get stronger. And it's acclimating to our system. It's playing good defense. It's learning the spots. It's all the technical basketball things that matter. And when it comes to the mental aspect, I'm someone who unfortunately can be kind of impatient and impulsive when it comes to goals. And obviously, my resume may not show that because a lot of it requires long term thinking and being a disciplinarian towards myself. But it's one of those things where it's a day to day thing. You cannot jump an extra 5 inches from one day to the next. I mean, yes, rest and food and nutrition and hydration, those all have a component, but these are daily goals that you're stacking one after the other, that you're progressively overloading with when it comes to the weight room, or when it comes to how you're dribbling, how you're passing, how you're shooting, how you're playing defense in tandem with four other people on your team, how you're negotiating and figuring out team dynamics. These things take time. And for me, this is going to be, and it has been, a workshop, a function of being able to learn that and have that faith in that process. So that's what I would say. Have faith in the process. Don't cheat it, and don't get too frustrated in the midst of it. The frustration is good when it comes to sport. It means that you want to get somewhere where you're not yet. It means that you still have somewhere to go. I I'm scared of the time where I'm going to think I can't improve, because that means that my hubris is fully taken over, and I hope that never happens.
What does success actually look like for you playing basketball? Like in 2 or 3, 4, 5 years' time, where do you want to be? What does that look like?
For me, I'm never going to only consider myself a basketball player. I think the unfortunate part about sports, especially basketball in the US and in Europe, is that it can take over people's personalities. And then when the game ends or they have an injury which doesn't allow them to play anymore, which forbids it, they kind of at a loss. I think my life so far, whether it be my sociability or personability, haha, podcast name,
Love it.
whether that be my academic desires and studying things like computer science, computational biology, and English, and everything else I did in college, to now the MBA. I'm never going to only want to do basketball. I'm always going to want to hedge it with something else. That could be whether I'm in Spain or Portugal or Turkey or Italy or Germany or France or China or Taiwan or wherever I might be, Japan, wherever, Australia, where you are right now.
Yeah.
Wherever it is, I'm always going to want to do something else. So we'll see what happens after this year with the opportunities that are available. I truly am focused mainly on this year, but the idea is to play somewhere and to do something either in technology and or in learning a language or getting another degree or something of that sort at the same time, and to continue maximizing throughout that period. I don't know how long basketball will last. It depends on a lot of factors, from body to opportunity to how I feel about it emotionally and mentally. But what I can say for sure is that for this next upcoming, let's say, 4 year chunk of my life, it will be what I dedicate a lot of my time to.
if I was to look at all the people that try and make it into Division One basketball in the US, let alone make it to the NBA, the number of people trying to make it is infinitesimally higher than the number of people that actually do make it, whether just getting into a good school, getting paid to play, or actually competing at the highest levels. If you were to go back in, to speak to your younger self, or to even speak to another 18-year-old or 17-year-old that wants to go through this process, what advice would you give them? Do you think this whole goal of trying to play professional basketball, is it worth it for 99% of people? Is this a goal worth striving for, even if there's a possibility you don't make it? Or is it better to hedge your bets, to do other things, and to not try at all?
It's a question of whether you like the process or if you just appreciate that you're doing it. And I think a lot of things in university, a lot of the sacrifices we make, we don't necessarily like in the moment, but we appreciate after the fact or even during. A lot of people told me, especially at the more, or I should say, less desirable parts of my college experience, oh, you're still going to look back in 20 years and love it. Um, I promise this is going somewhere. When it comes to this process, sports is very saturated. As we're finding out, as I know from my choice of academic career, computer science and technology is also very oversaturated. Look at the layoffs. Look at how AI is taking over a lot of different parts of entry level jobs. Um, it's a question of what you're willing to sacrifice, man. I mean, look, for me, I did not want to live away from my family in high school. I knew a lot of people that went to boarding school and they were much less well adjusted. I know in the UK, public school, boarding school, and other kinds are much more popular, so maybe culturally it works better. But I thought to myself very, I should say, consciously, very sentiently at the age of 13, 14, where there were choices to go to prep schools and do that process in the US where there's more exposure. Um, this is going to be the last time in my life where I live with my family full time. My grandfather actually died on LDOC of this past semester.
I'm sorry
Uh,
to hear that.
Thank you. A lot of other things that were happening that day, and that definitely was a damper on all of it. But when it comes to him, when it comes to my grandmother, when it comes to my uncle who passed in September of 2021, my first year of college, when it comes to my parents and my sister, the idea and the thought process for me was I've seen what happens when people go through that process and they're not with their families, and I don't want to make that sacrifice. That's not something I was willing to do. And all things considered, I think it worked out for me. Walking on a Duke, now on full scholarship, getting my MBA at UTSA, fully covered, having that opportunity to compete and really contribute in another way that I wasn't able to at Duke. In a very roundabout way, it worked out. But for many, I think it's a question of odds. You have to look at height. You have to look at ability. You have to look at circumstances. Basketball and a lot of it. And this maybe is the same or different for other sports. Is circumstance. It's who do you know? Who do your parents know? Who does your coach know? Do you go to a top prep school for basketball? Does that top prep school only have 3 hours of class a day? Does what are you willing to sacrifice to get to where you need to go? And can you advocate for yourself and bend your reality to your will to somehow compromise what you desire and not losing those things and otherwise? I was offered a contract at the age of 15 in Turkey up until I was 21 by Beşiktaş. I didn't take it because of NCAA eligibility rules. I also didn't take it because I would have been working like a dog and I wouldn't have been able to stay at the same school and I wouldn't have been able to get the same education and be as smart as I am now, however smart I actually am. Um, the point is, those were sacrifices I wasn't willing to make. And now you see pro players going to play in the NCAA, so maybe I was wrong for that. But at least from the education aspect, that wasn't something I was willing to do. So for a lot of kids, and especially, some kids especially come from very desperate situations. I had a number of teammates who came from places where their stipend that they got for playing for Beşiktaş or others who played for other clubs went back to their families in the villages or small towns they were from, and that helped subsidize their living, right? Economically, we're talking about different areas of the world and different levels of socioeconomic ability. So, if those things are true, then I understand how choices aren't always there. But understanding your values, understanding your priorities, understanding what you're willing to compromise and what you're not. For me, I knew what those things were, and I had a very good support system of my family at those times to decide those questions. I think a lot of people, they just fall into it and they don't think about it, and then they end up in a place they don't like. So my process was very different. Everyone else's process is very specific to them and their situation. But the best advice I can give is, how much do you value it? How much are you willing to sacrifice for it? And it's an economics question. Are those levels equivalent, or is the sacrifice worth more than the pain that you're going to endure? And that's what I would say to someone younger.
Stanley, I want to ask you one final question that might link to the question before. And I ask this question to every guest on Personable, is what is one thing that you would want a listener to take away from this episode? It can be something that you have said or something that you haven't said.
Don't be afraid to be multifaceted. And I'm going to be totally self-aggrandizing when I say that, as someone who has previously been very humble about such things. Do all of the things. I mean, people stretch themselves thin in a lot of ways, being a part of different groups and clubs and organizations and research projects and whatever. I mean, know your limit, of course, but do all. People say, oh, you did both. You did both the high academics and the high basketball. And my response is, no, I did all. Right, I maximize on all ends. I made good friends. I did research at Duke. I was a part of the things I wanted to be a part of. I actually read books. You know how hard it is to read books in college for pressure? It's, I did all of these things that I wanted to do. So don't let someone else or their limitations or inabilities determine what you can and cannot do. I think it is possible to do all, obviously within bounds. And I think that should be the lesson that someone takes away from this.
I wrote down three things. I wrote phenomenal podcast, elegant, well-spoken, and great storytelling. And I think that's a really great way to sum up everything you said. I think you're incredibly eloquent. I think you have a phenomenal way of telling stories. And I actually, in my own podcast, do a similar thing. You go back and listen to other ones. I like to use analogies in framing how I think about the world, because I think it's easier to talk about something with someone and solve a problem by looking at it externally versus bringing the person into the problem, because then they get more focused on who they are and their relation to it rather than seeing it from a bird's eye view. I think your ability to think of things from a really high level and be able to say that in a really concise manner is incredibly admirable. You had a profound impact on Duke, and even just seeing you around on campus, it was definitely a great part of my day, seeing you around with a smile on your face. And I'm very excited to see everything you do with your basketball career. And I know that it's going to work out for you. And I'm really excited to see where this grind of the next year leads you to. So thank you so much, Stanley, for coming on Personable.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you for the time.